Anna Cole pressed her palm flat against the cracked earth and didn't say a word for a long time. Then she stood, wiped the dust on her coat, and looked Wesley Crow dead in the eye. "Your father didn't fail this land," she said. "You've just been reading it wrong." Wesley's jaw tightened. He'd heard enough opinions from men who walked away. He didn't need one from a woman he'd hired 2 days ago to milk cows. But she was already walking toward the herd, and something in the way she moved made him follow. Before we go any further, if stories like this reach something deep in you, please subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Drop the name of your city in the comments below. I want to see just how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to where it all began. The advertisement was 17 words long. Wesley Crow counted them 3 times because he had nothing else to do while the ink dried and the shame settled into his chest like cold water. Seeking capable woman for ranch work. Honest wages. No questions asked. He'd nailed it to the post outside Hale's General Store on a Tuesday morning when the street was mostly empty because he couldn't stand the thought of anyone watching him do it. A crowman asking for help was bad enough. Asking in public felt like something close to surrender. He was 28 years old. His father had built the Crow Ranch from a single ox and $30, and Wesley was 6 weeks from losing it entirely. He rode back to the ranch without stopping, without speaking to anyone, and spent the rest of the day fixing a section of fence that didn't need fixing just to keep his hands from shaking. The response came 4 days later. Not a letter. A woman. She arrived at the front gate on a gray horse with one ear that sat crooked, a canvas sack tied behind the saddle, and a Winchester rifle laid across her lap like it belonged there. She wore a coat that had seen better decades. Her boots were worn at the heel. Her eyes were the color of creek water after a hard rain, clear on top, moving underneath. She stopped at the gate and looked at the property the way a doctor looks at a patient before deciding whether to tell the truth. "Wesley Crow," she said. "That's me." "Anna Cole." She didn't offer her hand. "I'm here about the work." He studied her for a moment. He didn't know what he'd expected. Something different. Someone with more noise about them, maybe. More explanation. "You got any experience with cattle?" he asked. "Some." "How much is some?" "Enough to know yours are in trouble from here." She nodded toward the east pasture without looking away from him. "That one on the far left has been favoring her right front leg for at least a week. She's been compensating so long the other 3 are starting to carry her weight pattern. You let that go another month, you'll lose the whole group to joint stress." Wesley looked at the cow, then back at Anna. "You could see that from the gate," he said. It wasn't a question. "I could see it from the road?" she said. He hired her on the spot for 2 weeks. 60 cents a day meals included the small room off the back of the barn that his father had built for a hand he'd never quite managed to keep. Anna Cole unsaddled her horse, put her sack in the room, and was back outside in 11 minutes asking to see the ledgers. "The ledgers," Wesley repeated. "Financial records. Your father kept them." "He did." "I need to see them." "You're a ranch hand," Wesley said, "not an accountant." Anna looked at him without expression. "Mr. Crow, you put 17 words in that advertisement, and one of them was capable. If you didn't mean it, say so now, and I'll ride back." Wesley didn't say so. He brought her the ledgers. There were 4 of them, big cloth-bound books that smelled like his father's tobacco, and 15 years of careful record-keeping. Howard Crow had written in a tight, deliberate hand every purchase and sale and loss, cataloged in columns that never quite added up to prosperity, but always somehow added up to survival. Anna sat at the kitchen table with the book spread open and didn't speak for 2 hours. Wesley moved around her, made coffee, went out to check the fence again, came back in. She hadn't moved. Her finger traced columns slowly, and occasionally she made a small mark in the margin with a pencil she'd pulled from her coat pocket. Finally she looked up. "Your father was breeding for something," she said. "He was breeding cattle. That's what ranchers do." "No." She turned the ledger to face him and pointed to a column of sale records spanning 8 years. Look at what he sold and what he kept. Every time he had a choice, he sold the heavier animals and kept the leaner ones. Every buyer thought he was giving away the best stock, but he wasn't. Wesley sat down slowly. What was he doing? He was selecting for cold tolerance and drought resilience. Anna's voice was steady, almost quiet, like she was reading something important aloud and didn't want to rush it. The animals he kept weren't small because they were weak. They were small because they were efficient. They could survive on less water, less grass, colder temperatures. He was building a line. My father never told me that. I don't think he'd finished understanding it himself yet. She closed the ledger carefully. But it's here. 15 years of it. And you've been selling it off. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Wesley didn't speak for a long time. How bad? He finally asked. You've sold roughly 40% of the animals that carried the strongest traits. The remaining 60% still have it, some more than others. If you stop selling from that group entirely and start identifying which ones carry the most resilience markers, you can rebuild the line in 3 to 4 years. She paused. But you have to stop selling the wrong ones first. I've been selling whatever I could to keep the bank off my back, Wesley said. I know. You know. The ledger shows the pattern. She met his eyes. You've been selling survival to buy time. That's the kind of trade that looks smart until you realize what you traded away. Wesley stood up and went to the window. Outside, the east pasture caught the last of the afternoon light, and he could see the cattle moving slowly, and he could see now that she'd pointed it out the way that one animal was stepping wrong. He'd been looking at this land his whole life, and he hadn't seen it. She'd been here 6 hours. 2 weeks, he said without turning around. That's what I hired you for. That's what I agreed to, she said. He turned. What would you need to start identifying the right animals? Anna thought for a moment. Access to the whole herd. Time to walk every acre of the grazing land. A notebook. She looked at the ledgers. And permission to keep working with these. That's all. That, and I want to see the water situation. The water's fine. Is it? She said it without challenge, just as a question that assumed the answer might be more complicated than he knew. It was. The following morning, Anna was up before dawn. Wesley heard her moving through the house, the soft sound of boots, the creak of the back door, and by the time he was dressed and outside, she was already 50 yards into the east pasture, with the herd shifting around her like water around a stone. She didn't rush them, didn't chase or corner. She just walked slowly among them, stopping beside each animal for a minute or two, running her hand along their flanks, checking their eyes, their hooves, their breathing patterns. Wesley watched from the fence. You going to stand there all morning? She called without looking up. He climbed the fence and walked out to her. That one, she said, nodding to a mid-sized red heifer standing slightly apart from the others. She's one of them, one of the resilience animals. She's got the bone structure your father was selecting for. Light frame, deep chest, wide nostrils. Anna crouched and ran her hand along the heifer's leg. She didn't lose condition over the winter the way the others did. I can see it in her coat. She retained more. She's not the biggest. She was never supposed to be the biggest. Anna stood. Your father wasn't building a show herd, Mr. Crow. He was building a herd that would still be standing when everyone else's was dead. Wesley looked at the heifer with different eyes. What do you need from me? He said. For now, just don't sell her. By the end of the first week, Anna had walked every acre of the 412 that made up the Crow Ranch. She'd tasted the soil in 3 different locations, actually crouched down and pressed a pinch of it to her tongue, which made the one remaining hand, a young man named Clem, stare at her like she'd lost her mind. What does that tell you? Clem asked. Whether the iron content is high enough to sustain the grass variety we need, she said, and kept walking. She'd mapped the grazing rotation on a sheet of paper, identified where the grass was being overgrazed and where it was being ignored, and laid the map on the kitchen table next to the ledgers. Your rotation is backward, she told Wesley. It's the way my father did it. Your father changed it in year 12. She pointed to an entry in the ledger. He started moving the herd east in spring instead of west. He never wrote down why, but I think he was responding to a drainage problem in the west field he'd identified. You went back to the old rotation after he died. Wesley looked at the map, then at the ledger, then at Anna. How do you know all this? He said. Where did you learn it? She was quiet for a moment. My family had land, she said, before they didn't. She didn't offer more than that, and Wesley didn't push. There was something in the way she said before they didn't that closed the subject, the way a good door closes firm, quiet, final. He switched the rotation the next morning. The cattle moved better within 3 days. Clem noticed it before Wesley did, which said something about how much Wesley was watching the cattle and how much he was watching Anna. He told himself it was professional observation. She was a temporary hire. He needed to understand her methods. But the truth was more honest than that, and he knew it. She worked harder than anyone he'd ever had on the property. Not dramatically, not with complaint or display, just quietly, steadily, with a kind of focused economy that made every hour count twice. She was up before him and still working after he'd gone inside. She ate fast and didn't linger over meals the way most people did. She spoke when she had something to say and didn't fill silence with noise. He found that harder to manage than he'd expected. One evening toward the end of the first week, she came in from the pasture and sat across from him at the table where he'd been reviewing the ledger she'd been working from. I need to tell you something, she said. He looked up. Clifford Bent came by the east fence line today. Wesley set down his coffee. What did he want? He said he was riding the boundary out of neighborly concern. She paused. He's not a neighborly man. No, Wesley said. He's not. Clifford Bent owned 3 times the land Wesley did and had been trying to acquire the Crow Ranch for 2 years through methods that always managed to stay just south of outright dishonest. He'd offered to buy at prices that seemed generous until you understood what he knew that Wesley didn't. He'd suggested Wesley consider letting go of the burden of the place. He'd made comments at the feed store at the bank around town, small comments carefully worded that added up to a portrait of the Crow Ranch as a failing enterprise that any sensible man would walk away from. What did you tell him? Wesley asked. I told him the Crow herd was not available for sale consolidation or neighborly concern, Anna said, and that if he had business to discuss, he should discuss it with the owner at the front gate, not with a ranch hand at the fence line. Wesley looked at her. He didn't like that, he said. No. Anna agreed. He didn't. Anna. He stopped, started again. The bank has a review scheduled in 3 weeks. If they decide to call the loan early, I know about the loan, she said. How do you know about the loan? The ledger shows the debt schedule, and Clem talks. She folded her hands on the table. If Bent is involved with the bank pressure, and I think he might be, then what happens in the next 3 weeks matters more than anything else. What do you mean involved with the bank? He's a depositor, a significant one. Banks listen to significant depositors. She met his eyes. The only thing that protects you is a clear documented case that this ranch is improving, not failing. Numbers, evidence, something the bank can't argue with. And you think you can build that in 3 weeks? She didn't answer immediately. I think I can start it, she said. Whether 3 weeks is enough depends on how fast the cattle respond to the rotation change, and whether we can get a breeding contract negotiated before the review date. A breeding contract? 2 ranchers to the north have already asked me about your herd. She said it matter-of-factly, like it wasn't extraordinary. Word travels faster out here than you think. I told them I'd have an answer by the end of next week. Wesley stared at her. You told them. He stopped. You've been here 9 days. 8, she corrected. 8 days. And ranchers are asking about our breeding program. About your breeding program, she said. I just answered their questions. He leaned back in his chair. The lamp between them threw shadows against the wall, and outside the wind had started moving through the canyon in that particular way that meant the temperature would drop before morning. Why are you doing this? he said. Anna looked at him. I said I'd work 2 weeks, she said. That's not what I'm asking. A pause, long enough that he thought she wasn't going to answer. My family's land was taken, she said finally. Not by a storm, not by bad luck, by a man who understood that a struggling family and a cooperative bank make an easy target. Her voice didn't change in tone or volume. That was somehow the worst part. I was 17. I watched my father sign papers he didn't fully understand because there wasn't anyone in the room telling him the truth. She looked down at the ledger. So when I see a ranch that's struggling because nobody's reading it right. She stopped. Then, I know what gets lost when that happens. Wesley didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say that would be adequate. They sat in the lamplight for a moment, and then Anna stood and said goodnight and went to the room off the barn, and Wesley sat alone with the ledgers and the sound of the wind and the slow, unfamiliar weight of having been trusted with something true. The second week was harder and faster and more consequential than the first. Anna identified 11 cattle she was certain carried the core resilience traits. She began documenting them: weights, measurements, behavioral patterns, condition scores in a new notebook she'd bought from Hale's General Store on a supply run. She labeled it Crowline Breeding Records, Volume 1, and when Wesley saw that something shifted in his chest that he wasn't prepared for. Volume 1. Like there would be more. She also identified a water problem. The main creek that fed the south pasture was being diverted not naturally, not by weather, but by a new cut in the channel upstream on the edge of Bent's property. Whoever had done it carefully, the kind of careful that said they'd thought about whether it would be noticed. Anna showed Wesley the cut on a Tuesday afternoon. He stood at the edge of it and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, something cleaner and sharper than fear. He felt angry. This was done, he said. Yes. This wasn't natural erosion. No, Anna said. The cut is too clean, and it follows the property line almost exactly, which means whoever did it understood the boundary. Bent. I can't prove it, she said. But I can document it, and I can file a formal water rights claim before the bank review, which means if the diversion is challenged legally later, you're already on record. Wesley looked at her. You know water rights law. I know enough, she said. My father didn't. He heard everything behind those 4 words. File it, he said. She filed it the next day. And 3 days after that, the bank sent a letter. The loan review had been moved up. Not 3 weeks. 10 days. Wesley read the letter twice standing in the yard, and then he went inside and put it on the table in front of Anna. She read it. Set it down. All right, she said. All right. We have 10 days. She picked up the new ledger, the breeding record. Then we'd better get to work. He looked at her across the table. The 2 weeks, he said. I hired you for 2 weeks. The 2 weeks aren't up yet, she said. And she went back to work. 10 days. Anna wrote it at the top of a clean page in the breeding record and stared at it for a moment before she started working. Wesley watched her from across the table. He hadn't slept well. The letter from the bank sat between them like something with weight to it, and he kept looking at it. The way a man looks at a wound he doesn't want to acknowledge is serious. Stop staring at it, Anna said without looking up. I'm not staring at it. You've looked at it 4 times in the last 3 minutes. She turned a page in the ledger. Looking at it won't change what it says. Neither will ignoring it. I'm not ignoring it. I'm working around it. She set her pencil down and looked at him directly. Here's what I need from you today. I need you to ride to the Halverson place and the McCready spread and confirm that both families are still interested in a breeding contract. Don't negotiate price. Just confirm interest. Can you do that? I can do that. Good. I need their answers by afternoon because I'm going to use them in the documentation package I'm building for the bank assessor. Wesley paused. What documentation package? The one that's going to keep this ranch off the auction block, she said. I've been building it for 3 days. I just need 2 more pieces. He hadn't known she was building anything. He'd seen her writing, seen the new ledger filling up, but he hadn't understood it had a shape yet, that she was constructing something deliberate, something designed. "How many pages?" he asked. "Right now 14. I want 22 before the assessor arrives." Wesley stood up slowly, put on his coat, got to the door and stopped. "Anna." She looked up. "If this doesn't work, ride to the Halverson place," she said. Not unkindly, just firmly. "Come back by noon." He rode. The Halverson place was 8 miles northeast, and Dale Halverson met him at the barn with the kind of look that said he'd been expecting someone from the Crow Ranch to come eventually, just not necessarily Wesley himself. "Heard you got a woman out there doing something interesting with your herd," Dale said. "Her name is Anna Cole," Wesley said. "She's been working the breeding records my father kept. Turns out he was building something nobody recognized." Dale crossed his arms. "What kind of something?" "Cold-tolerant line. Drought-resilient. She's identified the core animals, and she's rebuilding the selection process." Dale was quiet for a moment. Then, "My herd lost 11 head last winter. Cold snap came early and hit the north pasture hard." "I know," Wesley said. "Anna knows too. That's why she thought of you first." Something shifted in Dale's expression. Not dramatically, just a small settling, the way a man's face changes when he hears something that answers a question he's been carrying. "What are the terms?" Dale said. "She's still working out the structure, but she wanted me to confirm you're interested before she finalizes the package." "Tell her I'm interested," Dale said. "Tell her I've been interested since Clem mentioned what she found in your father's records." Wesley rode to the McCready spread next. The answer there was faster and less complicated. Tom McCready said yes before Wesley finished the second sentence, and then asked 3 questions about the breeding timeline that Wesley couldn't fully answer, and then said to tell the Cole woman that he'd send his best man over to discuss details whenever she was ready. Wesley rode back to the ranch. He walked through the door at 11:30 and found Anna at the table with 3 ledgers open simultaneously and the new breeding record propped against the lamp. "Both confirmed," he said. She didn't look up. "Good. Sit down. I need to explain what I'm putting together." He sat. She turned the breeding record so it faced him and pointed to the first page. "This is the foundation document," she said. "It establishes the breeding line your father created, what it is, how he built it, what it's designed to do. I've pulled every relevant entry from 15 years of his records and cross-referenced it with the current herd condition." She turned to the next section. "This part shows current herd performance, weight retention health indicators, winter survival rates compared to regional averages. Your cattle outperformed the county average last winter by 14%. Nobody knew that because nobody was measuring it." "Nobody was measuring it," Wesley repeated quietly. "I measured it. Retroactively from the loss records your father kept." She turned another page. "This section shows the grazing rotation correction and its immediate impact on grass recovery and cattle condition. This one shows the water rights filing and the evidence of upstream diversion. And this," she turned to the last completed section, "is the breeding contract summary. 2 confirmed partners' estimated annual income from breeding fees and projected herd growth over 3 years." Wesley looked at the pages. Clean columns, careful handwriting, numbers that told a story he hadn't known his own ranch was living. 22 pages of this," he said. "When I'm done, yes." "And you think the bank assessor will?" "I think the bank assessor is a man who has been sent here expecting to find a failing operation," Anna said. "I want him to find the opposite. Not a prosperous ranch that would be unbelievable, but an improving one. One with documented progress, confirmed contracts, and a clear trajectory." She paused. "A bank doesn't want to foreclose, Mr. Crow. Foreclosure is expensive and complicated. What they want is confidence that the loan is not a dead loss. We're going to give them that confidence." Wesley looked at her across the 3 open ledgers. "My father would have liked you," he said. It came out before he thought about it. He wasn't sure why he said it, but it was true. Anna looked at him for a moment. Then she looked back at the ledger. "Finish the fence section on the north side today," she said. I want everything on this property looking maintained when the assessor walks it." He went to fix the fence. Clem found him out there an hour later, working a post that had been leaning since spring. "She's something," Clem said, not as a question. "She's effective," Wesley said. "That's one word." Clem handed him a nail. "Dale Halverson's boy came by while you were writing. Said his father wants to know if Miss Cole would consider coming out to look at their herd before she finalizes the contract terms. Said he'd pay for her time." Wesley drove the nail in. "What did you tell him?" "Told him I'd pass it along." Clem paused. "You know other ranchers are going to start asking for her. Once word gets around what she found in your father's books." "She's contracted here," Wesley said, harder than he meant to. Clem went quiet for a moment. 2 weeks, he said carefully. "That's what you hired her for." Wesley didn't answer. That evening, Anna came in from the pasture later than usual. Wesley had kept a plate warm on the stove without quite admitting to himself that he was doing it. She sat down, ate without ceremony, and then pulled the breeding record back toward her. "I found something today," she said. Something in her tone made him set down his coffee. "What kind of something?" "There's a section of your father's ledger from 1879, 8 years before you took over. He made a notation I didn't fully understand at first." She opened the ledger to a page she'd marked with a strip of cloth. "He writes about a conversation with a man from the railroad survey team. They were mapping a potential expansion corridor through the Panhandle." Wesley felt something cold move through him. "The rail line," he said. "The proposed one, yes. Your father noted that the surveyor told him the Crow property sat on a natural passage point. Good grade accessible water central location." She looked up. "Mr. Crow, if that rail corridor ever gets approved, this land isn't just ranch land anymore." The silence that followed had weight to it. "Bent nose?" Wesley said. It wasn't a question. It came out of him slow and certain, the way a truth does when it's been waiting for you to catch up to it. "That's why he's been after this property for 2 years. It's not the cattle. It's not even the water. It's the corridor. The water rights are tied to it," Anna said. "If the rail comes through, whoever controls the water access along that corridor controls a significant portion of the infrastructure value." She paused. "The diversion upstream, it wasn't just harassment. He was trying to muddy the water rights picture before you could establish a clear legal claim." Wesley stood up and went to the window. Outside the ranch his father had built from $30, and an ox sat quiet in the dark. 412 acres that a dying man had walked every day for 30 years. That Wesley had taken over at 23 without a map or a manual, doing his best and still losing ground. And underneath all of it, this. A value nobody had named. "He's been patient," Wesley said. 2 years of pressure, small moves, comments at the bank offers that were almost fair. He was waiting for me to break." "Yes," Anna said. "And I almost did." "Yes," she said again. Not cruelly, just honestly. Wesley turned around. "The bank review," he said. "If Bent's connected to the pressure on the loan, then the assessor may already be primed to see failure," Anna said. "Which means we can't just show improvement. We have to show it so clearly that there's no room for interpretation." "Can we do that in 8 days?" She looked at the breeding record, at the ledgers, at the documentation she'd been building page by careful page. 7, she said. "The assessor comes in 7 days, not 8. I miscounted yesterday." Wesley stared at her. "You miscounted?" "I corrected it this morning." He almost laughed. He didn't, but he almost did, which was the first time in 6 weeks that almost laughing had been anywhere near possible. 7 days, he said. 7 days, she confirmed. "I need you to do 3 things tomorrow. First, ride to the county land office and ask for any public records related to the railroad survey from 1879 to 1883. Don't tell them why. Second, ask Clem to get me the weight records for every animal we've sold in the last 2 years. Third," she stopped. "Third," he said. "Third, I need you to stop apologizing for this ranch. Wesley blinked. I haven't been. Every time you talk about it, you lead with what's wrong, she said. To Halverson, to McCready, probably to the bank when they called you in. You explain the problems before you mention anything that's working. She held his gaze. That has to stop. When the assessor comes, you talk about what's improving. You talk about the breeding line, the contracts, the water claim. You let the documentation speak to the problems. Your job is to talk about the future. He was quiet. My father used to say something like that, he said finally. What did he say? He said a man who leads with his wounds invites the vultures in. Wesley looked at the ledger. I forgot that somewhere along the way. Anna closed the breeding record. Remember it, she said. The next 4 days moved like a current, fast, relentless, no room to stand still without being swept along. Wesley rode to the county land office. The clerk there, a thin man named Doherty who smelled like ink and old paper, found 3 survey documents from the 1880 railroad assessment. The corridor was real. The proposed route ran through the southern edge of the Crow property, crossing the creek at exactly the point the diversion had targeted. Wesley carried the documents home without stopping. Anna read them at the table that night without speaking. When she finished, she made 2 notations in the documentation package and closed it. He's known about this for years, she said. How long? Long enough that he started moving on the water rights diversion before you hired me. She was quiet for a moment. He almost had you, Mr. Crow. Another few months, and this ranch would have been legally vulnerable on 3 fronts simultaneously, the loan, the water rights, and the title, if he'd found a way to challenge the deed. But he doesn't have me yet. No, Anna said. He doesn't. Clem brought the sale weight records the following morning, 3 years' worth, scrawled on a mix of receipts and torn ledger pages, that Anna spread across the table and sorted in 40 minutes. She cross-referenced them against the breeding record, identified 9 additional animals that had been sold that carried partial resilience traits, and updated the documentation to reflect the accurate scale of what had been lost and what remained. The breeding record was on page 19 by Thursday. On Friday, Dale Halverson rode over himself. He wasn't the kind of man who usually made 8-mile rides for business discussions, which meant the business was serious enough to warrant it. He sat at the kitchen table across from Anna and Wesley and put his hat on his knee and said, I want to formalize the contract before the bank review. Wesley looked at Anna. Anna looked at Dale. Why before? She said. Because I know how bank reviews work, Dale said. A confirmed contract on paper before the assessor arrives is worth 3 verbal commitments after. If you want, I'll put it in writing today. He reached into his coat and produced a folded document. I had my lawyer draw something up. Simple terms. Breeding access to your identified resilience line, 2 seasons with option to extend. Fixed fee per animal. He slid it across the table. Read it. Change what you don't like. But I want this done before Tuesday. Anna read the contract in silence. Wesley watched her read it. She made 2 small changes in pencil, one to the fee structure, one to the extension terms, and slid it back to Dale. Dale read the changes, nodded once. Agreed, he said. They signed it at the kitchen table with Clem as witness, and when it was done, Anna added it to the documentation package as page 20. 2 more pages, Wesley said. 1 more page, she said. I added the Halverson contract as the final piece. The last page is a summary statement. I'll write it tonight. He watched her work that night until the lamp was burning low and the wind outside had gone quiet. She wrote with the same focus she brought to everything. No wasted movement. No scratching out and rewriting, just steady, deliberate words moving across the page. When she set the pen down, she turned the last page to face him. Read it, she said. He read it. It was a single page. It laid out in plain and careful language the case for the Crow Ranch, not as a triumph, not as a story, but as a documented reality. The breeding line, the contract, the water claim, the grazing recovery, the financial trajectory, each point clean and supported by the pages behind it. At the bottom, a single concluding line. The Crow Ranch is not a ranch in decline. It is a ranch in transition. The evidence supports a continuation of the existing loan structure with confidence. Wesley set the page down. 22 pages, he said. 22 pages, Anna said. He looked at her across the table in the low lamplight. This woman who had arrived at his gate 9 days ago on a horse with one crooked ear, who had read his father's forgotten work and understood it better than anyone living, who had built a legal and financial argument for the survival of his ranch from records nobody else had bothered to open. "What happens," he said carefully, "after the assessor comes?" Anna gathered the pages into a neat stack and squared the edges against the table. "Let's get through Tuesday first," she said. But her hands slowed just for a moment before she tied the stack closed. And Wesley noticed. Tuesday came the way hard days always do, too fast and too slow at the same time. Wesley was up before the sun. He heard Anna moving in the room off the barn before he'd finished lacing his boots, and by the time he stepped outside, she was already at the water trough, checking the condition of the 3 animals she'd flagged as the strongest representatives of the resilience line. She wasn't nervous. That was the thing that struck him. She moved through the morning the same way she moved through every morning, with that same focused economy that made every action count. He was nervous enough for both of them. "Eat something," she said without turning around. "I'm not hungry." That wasn't a suggestion. He went inside and ate something. Clem arrived at 7:30 and immediately began doing the things Clem did when he was anxious, which involved finding small tasks that didn't need doing and doing them loudly. He oiled a hinge that was already oiled. He recoiled a rope that was already coiled. He swept a section of the barn floor that Anna had swept the previous afternoon. "Clem," Anna said. "Ma'am?" "Go check the south fence line, and don't come back until you've walked all of it." "The south fence is fine." "Then it won't take you long," she said. Clem went to check the south fence. Wesley stood in the yard with the 22-page documentation package under his arm tied with cord the way Anna had left it, and watched the road that came in from the east. The assessor would come from that direction. He'd be from the Amarillo branch, probably a bankman, not a landman, which was either good or bad, depending on whether Anna's documentation was clear enough for someone who didn't know cattle from cordwood. "Stop watching the road," Anna said. "I'm not watching the road. You've been watching the road for 20 minutes. He turned around. She was standing in the barn doorway with the breeding record in her hand, making a final notation. "I keep thinking about what you said," he said. "About your father. About signing papers he didn't understand." Anna looked up. "Don't think about that today," she said. "I'm thinking about it because I want to understand what we're walking into. If Bent has already spoken to the bank, if the assessor comes here with his mind made up, then we change his mind," Anna said. "That's what the 22 pages are for. And if 22 pages aren't enough..." She was quiet for a moment. "Then we make sure he remembers this conversation," she said. "A man can argue with paper. It's harder to argue with a person who knows exactly what they're talking about and isn't afraid of the questions." Wesley looked at her. "Are you afraid of the questions?" he said. "No," she said. And the way she said it, flat and absolute without any bravado behind it, was the most reassuring thing he'd heard in 6 weeks. The assessor arrived at 9:17. His name was Gerald Fitch, and he was younger than Wesley expected, maybe 35, with a neat coat and clean boots that said he'd changed them after the ride, and a leather satchel that said he came prepared. He shook Wesley's hand with the firm, practiced grip of a man who did this regularly, looked at the property with the careful, neutral expression of a man paid to have no visible opinion, and then looked at Anna. "This is Anna Cole," Wesley said. "She manages the breeding program." Fitch looked at Anna the way men often looked at Anna the first time, with a flicker of recalibration, a small adjustment of expectation that he covered quickly with professionalism. "Miss Cole," he said. "Mr. Fitch," she said. "Thank you for making the ride out. I know the timing was tight on your end." The bank appreciates your cooperation with the review. Fitch said the way people say things they've been trained to say. We have documentation prepared, Anna said. But I'd like to walk the property with you first if that's agreeable. I find numbers make more sense when you've seen what they're describing. Fitch looked mildly surprised. Most operations prefer to start with the financial review. Most operations haven't had someone read their records properly in 15 years, Anna said pleasantly. We'd like to show you what we found. Fitch agreed to the walk. They went to the east pasture first, where the 11 identified resilience cattle were grazing together, separated from the general herd, the way Anna had arranged them 3 days prior. She walked Fitch to the fence and pointed out the specific animals, their frame, their condition, the particular traits that distinguished them, and explained in plain and unhurried language what Howard Crowe had spent 15 years quietly building. Fitch listened. He was good at listening without showing what he thought, which was a banker's skill, but twice his pen moved to his notebook without him seeming to realize it. These animals have been formally identified as a selective breeding line, he said. Documented in the breeding record cross-referenced with 15 years of the late Howard Crowe's financial ledgers, Anna said. She handed him the breeding record. Page 1 establishes the baseline. Page 4 shows the identification methodology. Page 7 shows the current condition scores compared to county averages. Fitch opened to page 7. He read for a moment. 14% above county average for winter retention, he said. Correct. This is your calculation, cross-referenced against the county loss reports filed with the Extension Office last March, Anna said. The comparison numbers are public record. I can give you the reference citations if you need them for your files. Fitch made a note. They walked the grazing rotation next. Anna explained the correction she'd made, the science behind it, the immediate impact on grass recovery. She showed him the soil condition in the 3 locations she'd tested. She showed him where the grass had already begun coming back in the previously overgrazed section, 3 weeks ahead of what the original rotation would have produced. She did not perform any of this. She didn't oversell or dramatize. She just explained what she'd found and what she'd done about it, the way a person explains something they understand completely and aren't worried about being questioned on. Wesley walked behind them and said almost nothing because Anna had told him the night before that his job today was to confirm and support, not to lead. You talk when he asks you something directly, she'd said. Otherwise, let the work speak. He was beginning to understand what she meant about leading with wounds. At the south field, Fitch stopped and looked toward the creek. The water rights filing, he said. I saw a notation in your account file about a recent claim. Filed 8 days ago, Anna said. The documentation is in the package section 4. There's evidence of an upstream diversion affecting the creek flow to the south pasture. The diversion appears deliberate and follows the property boundary closely enough to suggest someone with knowledge of the land performed it. Fitch's expression remained neutral. That's a significant allegation. I didn't make an allegation, Anna said evenly. I filed a water rights claim and documented physical evidence of a diversion. What caused it is a matter for the county water board. What matters for today's review is that the claim establishes our legal standing to the water access, which affects the long-term value assessment of this property. She paused, particularly given the railroad survey history. Fitch stopped walking. The railroad survey, he said. The 1880 corridor assessment, Anna said. We have the county records. The proposed route crosses the southern section of the Crowe property at the creek junction, the same point the diversion targets. I imagine that's relevant context for a comprehensive valuation. There was a silence, not a comfortable one. Fitch looked at the creek, then at Anna. Then he wrote something in his notebook that he didn't read aloud. Let's look at the financial documentation, he said. They went back to the house. Anna laid the 22 pages on the table in the order she'd arranged them, with the Halverson contract on top. Fitch sat across from her, and Wesley sat to the side, and nobody spoke while Fitch read. He read for 40 minutes. Wesley counted. He didn't mean to count, but he did, because the silence needed something to fill it, and counting was better than the thoughts that kept trying to take up the space. Twice, Fitch stopped and asked Anna a question. Once about the fee structure in the Halverson contract. Once about the projection methodology in the 3-year herd growth estimate. Both times Anna answered without hesitation, with enough specific detail to make it clear the numbers hadn't been invented to impress anyone. When Fitch finished, he straightened the pages carefully and set them back in their stack. "The McCready interest," he said. "You indicated a second breeding contract is in discussion." Tom McCready confirmed verbal interest. "We haven't formalized terms yet because we prioritized the Halverson agreement before the review." Anna looked at Fitch steadily. "We expect to complete that contract within 2 weeks. And the breeding program can support 2 external contracts while maintaining the internal herd development." "Yes, I've accounted for that in the capacity projections on page 16. Fitch turned to page 16. He looked at it for a long time. Then he closed the documentation package and folded his hands on top of it. "Miss Cole," he said, "how long have you been working this operation?" 17 days, she said. The silence that followed was brief but absolute. 17 days, Fitch repeated. "The records were already here," Anna said. "I just read them." Fitch looked at Wesley. "Mr. Crow, are you satisfied with the direction the operation is taking under Miss Cole's guidance?" Wesley thought about how to answer that carefully, the way Anna had suggested: talk about what's improving, talk about the future, let the documentation speak to the problems. "My father built something on this land that nobody understood until Anna arrived," he said, "including me. She found it, documented it, and started rebuilding it in 17 days. I'm not satisfied." He paused. "I'm proud. There's a difference." Fitch nodded once, made a final notation. "I'll need to submit my assessment to the branch manager," he said. "The formal response will come in writing within 5 business days." "Of course," Anna said. Fitch gathered his satchel and stood. He shook Wesley's hand again. He shook Anna's hand, which wasn't something Wesley had expected, but Fitch did it without hesitation, with the same firm professional grip. "Miss Cole," he said, "this is the most thorough preparation I've encountered in 4 years of field assessments." "The ranch earned it," Anna said. "I just wrote it down." Fitch rode out at noon. Wesley and Anna stood in the yard and watched him go, and neither of them spoke until the sound of hooves had faded completely. Then Clem appeared from the direction of the south fence, slightly out of breath, and looked at their faces and said, "Well, we wait," Anna said, and went inside. Wesley stood in the yard a moment longer. He didn't know what the bank would decide. 5 business days was 5 business days, and Bent still had influence he hadn't fully deployed, and the world had a long history of punishing people who did everything right at exactly the wrong time. But something had shifted this morning. He'd felt it during the walk, in the way Fitch's pen moved without being told to, in the way the man's professional neutrality had developed small cracks at the edges. When Anna laid the railroad survey on the table, in the way he'd said 4 years of field assessments, like he was measuring something against it. Wesley went inside. Anna was already at the table with the breeding record open, making a note that had nothing to do with the bank review, just working, just continuing. "You said the ranch earned it," Wesley said. "When Fitch said the documentation was thorough, you said the ranch earned it." "It did," Anna said. "Not I built it or I worked for it." She looked up. "It's your father's work," she said. "I just organized it. It's more than that, and you know it." She was quiet for a moment. Then she looked back at the breeding record. "My family's ranch was 60 acres, she said. Small by any measure. My father worked it from the time he was 20 until the bank took it when I was 17. He did everything he was supposed to do." Her voice was steady, but something underneath it wasn't. "The man who took it, he didn't do anything dramatic. No threats, no confrontation. He just waited and talked to the right people, and used the legal system the way a tool gets used." She paused. "I never had 22 pages to put on a table in front of anyone." Wesley didn't move. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be sorry," she said. "Just keep this ranch." He sat down across from her. "Anna, He waited until she looked at him. What happens after the bank responds? After the McCready contract is signed? After the ranch is stable? She held his gaze. One thing at a time, she said. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. But something in her face had changed, some small careful thing that she didn't entirely succeed in keeping out of her expression. Wesley noticed it. He noticed it and didn't push because she had taught him without meaning to that the things worth knowing about Anna Cole would come in their own time, at their own pace, and that pushing would only close the door. But he filed it away. The way her hands had slowed the night she tied the documentation package. The way her voice went careful when she talked about her father's land. The way she'd said, just keep this ranch, like it cost her something to say it. 3 days later, the letter arrived. Not from the bank. From Clifford Bent. Wesley opened it at the gate, which was where the rider had handed it to him. He read it standing there in the morning cold. Then he walked to the barn and found Anna. Read this, he said. She read it. Bent's letter was 4 paragraphs long and written in the smooth, careful language of a man who wanted to sound reasonable while saying something that wasn't. He expressed concern, neighborly concern about the recent water rights filing, which he described as based on a misunderstanding of the natural drainage patterns in the area. He noted that the railroad corridor survey was a matter of public record, and that any assumption of special value attached to the Crow property based on an 80-year-old proposal was in his considered opinion premature. He suggested that Wesley might wish to discuss these matters before they became unnecessarily complicated. The last paragraph offered to buy the ranch. The number was higher than any previous offer. Anna set the letter down. He's scared, she said. He's offering more money because he's scared. She looked at Wesley. He knows the bank review happened. He doesn't know how it went, but he knows we filed the water rights claim, and he knows about the Halverson contract because Dale Halverson told 3 people before the ink was dry. She tapped the letter. This isn't a generous offer. This is a man trying to close a door before it swings all the way open. What do I do with it? Anna looked at him steadily. You write back, she said. 2 sentences. The Crow Ranch is not for sale. Any further communication regarding the property should be directed to your legal counsel. I don't have legal counsel. Then you'd better find some before he writes back, she said. She said it with a calm so absolute it was almost funny. Wesley wrote the 2 sentences that afternoon and had Clem write it to the post. The bank's response arrived the following morning. Wesley was out at the east pasture when Anna found him. She walked across the field toward him with an envelope in her hand and an expression he couldn't read at that distance. And for a moment, just a moment, every certainty he'd built over the past 17 days dissolved into the particular cold fear of a man who has tried everything and doesn't know what comes after trying. She stopped in front of him and held out the envelope. He took it, opened it, read it. The bank would not be calling the loan early. The assessment had found sufficient evidence of operational improvement and confirmed contract income to justify continuation of the existing loan structure. A formal review would be scheduled in 6 months, at which time the breeding program progress and second contract completion would be evaluated. 6 months. Wesley read it twice. Then he looked at Anna. She was watching him with that careful creek water expression, clear on top, moving underneath. 6 months, he said. 6 months, she said. That's enough time. Yes, she said. It is. And then Clem called from the fence line something about the heifer on the north end acting up, and Anna turned and walked toward the sound of the problem, the way she always did without ceremony, without pause. But she was smiling when she turned. Wesley saw it. Just barely. Just for a second. But he saw it. 6 months felt like a gift and a deadline at the same time. Wesley pinned the bank letter to the wall above the kitchen table, not for decoration, not out of sentiment, but because he wanted it visible every morning when he sat down with the ledgers. A reminder of exactly how much time they had and exactly what that time had to produce. Anna saw him pin it up and didn't say anything. But the next morning, she moved her chair slightly so the letter was in her sightline too. Neither of them mentioned that. The McCready contract came together faster than expected. Tom McCready rode over himself on the Thursday, after the bank response arrived, sat at the same kitchen table where the assessor had sat, and spent 2 hours with Anna going over the breeding terms, with the kind of careful attention that said he'd been thinking about this for a while and had come prepared to negotiate seriously. He didn't negotiate much. Anna's terms were fair and structured well enough that pushing back would have looked like stubbornness rather than strategy. McCready was smart enough to know the difference. When he signed, he sat back and looked at Anna with an expression that Wesley had started to recognize on the faces of men who encountered her for the first time in a professional capacity. A look that was part respect and part recalibration, like a man adjusting his understanding of the room he was standing in. "Miss Cole," McCready said, "I've been ranching this country for 19 years. I want you to know I don't say this lightly." He paused. "Your father's breeding line, your documentation of it is going to change how people in this county think about herd selection." "It's Wesley's father's breeding line," Anna said, "but you're the one who found it." She closed the contract folder. "Someone would have eventually." McCready looked at Wesley. "You'd better keep her." He said it the way men say things they think are simple observations, without understanding the full weight of what they've dropped into the room. Wesley said nothing. Anna stood up and offered McCready coffee, which redirected the moment efficiently. But after McCready left, the silence in the kitchen had a different quality to it. Something unsaid, sitting in the middle of it, taking up space. "He's not wrong," Wesley said. "Don't," Anna said. "I'm not saying anything. You were about to." He was. He let it go. For now. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt for the first time since Wesley had taken over the ranch like something sustainable. Not comfortable, sustainable. There was a difference, and the difference mattered. Anna's breeding program moved into its second phase. She wasn't just identifying animals anymore, she was managing a systematic rotation between the resilience line and the general herd, tracking every breeding outcome in the record book, and beginning to develop what she called a survival scoring system for evaluating offspring. It was meticulous and time-consuming and required the kind of patience that most people didn't have. Anna had it in abundance. Clem started helping with the tracking. He'd been skeptical at first, not of Anna exactly, but of the level of detail she required, the way every measurement had to be exact and every notation had to be legible. He was used to ranching by feel and instinct, the way most men in the Panhandle were. One morning, Wesley found him sitting on a fence post, with the breeding record open on his knee, squinting at Anna's notations. "You're reading the record," Wesley said. "Trying to," Clem said. "She marks things in a way that makes sense once you understand the system, but you have to understand the system first." "Is that a problem?" Clem looked up. "No, I just never thought about cattle this way before. Like they're—" He searched for the word. "Like they're individuals, not inventory." "Anna thinks about everything that way," Wesley said. Clem was quiet for a moment. Then, "She's not staying, is she?" Wesley felt the question like a stone dropped into still water. He didn't answer right away. "Her contract was 2 weeks," he said. "Her contract was 2 weeks, 6 weeks ago," Clem said. "She's still here." "She's still here?" "That's not the same as staying." Wesley took the breeding record from Clem's hands, looked at a page without really reading it, and handed it back. "Get the north herd moved before noon," he said. Clem took the record and didn't push further. But he watched Wesley walk away with the expression of a man who already knew the answer to his own question. The first real sign of trouble came on a Tuesday 5 weeks after the bank response. Clem came in from a supply run to Hale's, looking the way he looked when he had something to say and wasn't sure how to say it. "Spit it out," Anna said. She was at the table without looking up. "There's talk in town," Clem said. "There's always talk in town." "This is specific talk." He set down the supply list. "About you. About the breeding program. About how a woman who nobody knows anything about showed up here and started making claims about the crow herd that might not hold up to close inspection." Anna set her pen down slowly. Who's talking? She said. Starts with Bent, Clem said. But he's not the one saying it out loud. He's got 2 or 3 men doing that for him. At the feed store at the post office. Just questions. Friendly questions. Where did that Cole woman train? Who did she work for before? Has anyone verified those breeding records are accurate? He paused. The kind of questions that don't need to be true to do damage. Wesley came in from the back and read the room immediately. What happened? Bent's running a whisper campaign, Anna said. Her voice was level, but her hands on the table were still. Questioning my credentials. Wesley looked at Clem, who nodded confirmation, and then back at Anna. Can he damage the contracts? Wesley said. Halverson and McCready already signed. He can't undo that. She thought for a moment. But the 6-month bank review is coming, and if there's enough doubt floating around this county about the validity of the breeding program, a nervous branch manager might use it as cover to revisit the assessment. What do we do? Anna was quiet. Not the quiet of someone who didn't know the quiet of someone running through options quickly and discarding the ones that wouldn't hold. I need you to write a letter, she said finally. To the County Agricultural Extension Office, request a formal evaluation of the crow breeding program by one of their assessors. Wesley stared at her. You want to invite scrutiny. I want to invite the right scrutiny before Bent invites the wrong kind. She met his eyes. If the Extension Office evaluates the program and validates it, that's public record. Bent's questions stop having anywhere to land. And if they evaluate it and find problems, they won't find problems, she said, because there aren't any. The certainty in her voice was not arrogance. It was the certainty of someone who had checked the work 3 times and knew exactly what was there. Wesley wrote the letter that afternoon. The response from the Extension Office came back in 4 days. An assessor named Harlan Burke would visit within 2 weeks. 2 days after that letter arrived, something else happened that nobody had anticipated. A woman came to the front gate. Wesley was in the barn when Clem knocked on the post and said there was a woman asking for Miss Cole. Not for the ranch, not for the owner, specifically for Anna. Wesley came out. She was a small woman, maybe 60, with a weathered face and steady eyes and a coat that had been good quality once. She sat straight on her horse and looked at Wesley with the patient expression of someone who had traveled far enough that a few more minutes of waiting wasn't going to cost her anything. I'm looking for Anna Cole, she said. She's on the property, Wesley said. Can I ask who's calling? My name is Ruth Hensley, the woman said. I knew Anna's mother. Wesley went and got Anna. He didn't hear what happened next. He gave them space, because something in Ruth Hensley's expression said that whatever she'd come to say wasn't meant for an audience. He went back to the barn and worked on the tack that needed oiling, and told himself he wasn't listening. He heard almost nothing. Only once did Anna's voice rise above the murmur of their conversation, and what he caught was 3 words you should have before it dropped back down again. Ruth Hensley left an hour later. She nodded to Wesley on her way out, which was the entirety of their interaction, and rode back the way she'd come. Anna came into the barn. She picked up an unused brush and turned it in her hands, not brushing anything, just holding it. You don't have to tell me, Wesley said. Ruth Hensley knew my mother before she died, Anna said. She was there when my father lost the land. She says there was a document, a letter from the bank, a specific clause in the original loan that was never fully explained to my father. She kept a copy. Her hands tightened on the brush. She says the man who arranged that loan was a business associate of Clifford Bent. The barn went very quiet. Bent was connected to your family's land loss, Wesley said. She can't prove the connection directly, but she has the letter, and the letter shows the clause that was used to call the loan early was irregular, the kind of irregular that a lawyer might find interesting. Anna set the brush down. He's done this before, Wesley. Different property, different family, same method. He waits for vulnerability. He applies pressure to the bank, and he moves in when the family breaks. Wesley understood then fully completely why Anna had come to the Crow Ranch. why she'd read those ledgers the way she had. Why she'd built 22 pages of documentation with the urgency of someone who knew exactly what happened when there were only 17 words and no evidence to stand behind. "Your father's land," he said. "Bent didn't acquire it himself. He was too careful for that. But he was the reason the loan was called." She looked at Wesley steadily. "I didn't know that when I came here. I came because your advertisement found me at the right moment. But I know it now. And Ruth Hensley's letter. She's willing to make it available if it's ever needed for a legal proceeding." Anna's voice was controlled and precise, and underneath it was something that had been carrying its own weight for a long time. "It may never be needed, but I want you to know it exists." Wesley moved toward her. He stopped himself before he closed the distance entirely, because this wasn't the moment for the thing that was moving through him. Not yet. Not with so much still unsettled. "Anna," he said. She looked at him. "I'm glad you came," he said. "To the gate, that first day. I'm glad the advertisement found you." She held his gaze for a long moment. "Don't say that yet," she said quietly. "Wait until this is finished." He waited. Harlan Burke from the extension office arrived on a Thursday 2 weeks to the day from when Wesley had sent the letter. He was older than Fitch, heavier, with the worn-in look of a man who'd spent more time in pastures than offices, and he arrived without ceremony and went straight to the cattle. He spent 4 hours with Anna. Wesley watched from a distance and tried to read what was happening by their body language, which was like trying to read a language he only halfway knew. Burke asked questions, many of them, and Anna answered each one without hesitation, and twice went to the breeding record to reference specific data. At one point, Burke crouched down beside the red heifer, the one Anna had identified on the second morning, and ran his hands along her frame in the same slow, deliberate way Anna had. When he stood back up, he said something to Anna that Wesley couldn't hear. Anna nodded once. Burke came back to where Wesley was standing and extended his hand. "Mr. Crow," he said. "I've been assessing breeding programs in this county for 22 years. He shook Wesley's hand. "What Miss Cole has identified and documented in your herd is the most significant selective breeding discovery I've encountered in at least a decade." Wesley looked at Anna, who was standing slightly behind Burke with the breeding record in her hands, and her expression was careful and contained, but her eyes said something different. "What does that mean for the formal report?" Wesley said. "It means the Extension Office will be issuing a written validation of the crow breeding program," Burke said, "which will be filed with the county agricultural records and will be available to any party requesting verification." He paused. "Including your bank." Bent's whisper campaign had just run into a wall. That evening was the quietest one since Anna had arrived. They sat at the kitchen table after Clem had gone home with the breeding record between them and the bank letter still pinned to the wall and the lamp burning low. "You knew Burke would validate it," Wesley said. "I knew the work was sound," Anna said. "That's not the same thing as knowing how he'd respond to it." "But you weren't worried." She looked at him. "I was worried about a lot of things. The work wasn't one of them." He poured coffee for both of them, without being asked, which was something that had happened gradually over the past weeks. The small domestic rhythms of two people sharing a space, developing their own logic without discussion. Anna wrapped her hands around the cup. "Ruth Hensley asked me something," she said. "Before she left." Wesley waited. "She asked if I was staying." The lamp between them held absolutely still. "What did you tell her?" Wesley said. Anna looked at the breeding record, at the wall where the bank letter was pinned, at the coffee in her hands. "I told her I hadn't decided yet," she said. Wesley nodded slowly. "What would it take," he said, "to decide?" She was quiet for a long time. "The ranch needs to be stable," she said. "Not surviving stable. There's a difference, and it needs to be mine too in some real way. Not charity, not wages, a real stake." "A partnership," Wesley said. She met his eyes. "Yes, Then let's make the ranch stable, he said. And then we'll talk about the partnership. Anna looked at him for a long moment. All right, she said. It was 2 words. Just 2 words. But they landed in the room with the weight of a decision much larger than 2 words. And both of them knew it. And neither of them said anything else about it that night. Outside, the wind moved through the canyon the way it always did, and the cattle were quiet in the pasture and the Resilience herd. Howard Crow's quiet legacy finally stood in the dark. The small, strong things that had survived everything, they were built to survive. The ranch was not stable yet, but it was closer than it had ever been. And then 4 days later, Clem came running from the north fence line, with his hat in his hand and his face the color of old ash, and Wesley knew before Clem opened his mouth that whatever came next would not be quiet. Someone cut the fence, Clem said, breathing hard. North section. 3 of the Resilience animals are gone. Wesley was already moving before Clem finished the sentence. He grabbed his coat from the hook by the door and was halfway across the yard when Anna came out of the barn, read his face, and fell into step beside him without asking a single question. That was the thing about Anna, she didn't waste time on questions when action was the answer. Clem led them to the north fence at a run. The cut was clean, not torn, not broken by a spooked animal pushing through cut. 4 clean strokes of wire cutters through 2 sections of fence, opening a gap wide enough to push cattle through without difficulty. The ground on the other side showed tracks, and the tracks showed purpose. 3 sets of hoof prints moving north in a tight cluster, the way cattle move when they're being led, not when they're wandering. Anna crouched at the edge of the gap and studied the ground without speaking. When did you last check this section? Wesley asked Clem. Yesterday morning, Clem said. It was fine yesterday morning. So sometime in the last 24 hours. Overnight is my guess, Anna said. She stood up. The ground's dry on top, but damp underneath where the tracks pressed deepest. They came through before the dew burned off. Early morning, maybe 4 or 5. Wesley looked north toward Bent's property. They'll be on his land by now, he said. Maybe, Anna said. Or they'll be somewhere that isn't Bent's land but is accessible from his. She turned to Clem. Ride to the Halverson place and tell Dale what happened. Don't ask for anything yet, just tell him. Then ride to McCready and do the same. Why? Clem said. Because contracted partners have standing, Anna said. If those 3 animals are part of the documented breeding program under active contracts, their removal from this property isn't just theft, it's interference with a legal commercial agreement. Wesley looked at her. You thought about this already, he said. I thought about what Bent might do when everything else failed, she said. This is what he does when he can't get the land. He goes after the thing that makes the land valuable. The cold clarity of that landed in Wesley's chest like a fist. He doesn't just want the ranch, Wesley said. He wants to destroy the breeding program so the railroad corridor valuation collapses. Without the water rights, without the breeding income, and without the extension office validation, meaning anything, because the core animals are gone, the ranch reverts to being a marginal operation with a debt load, Anna said, which is exactly what it was when I arrived. She met his eyes. He didn't need to buy it. He just needed to put it back where it was. Clem, Wesley said, ride. Clem was on his horse in 4 minutes. Wesley and Anna went back to the house. She pulled on her coat and picked up the breeding record and opened it to the identification pages. The detailed documentation on each of the 11 Resilience animals' photographs and measurements and individual marking descriptions. Which 3? She said. He looked at the pages, thought about what he'd seen in the pasture over the past weeks, which animals, which faces he could identify at a distance now. The red heifer, he said. The one you found on the 2nd morning. Anna's jaw tightened slightly. And the gray bull calf and the black-faced cow with the split ear. She looked at the pages, made 3 notations. Then she looked up. Those are the 3 highest-scoring animals in the program, she said. The ones Harlan Burke specifically referenced in his evaluation. He knew which ones to take, Wesley said. Yes. Someone told him. Anna set the record down carefully. Someone who had access to Burke's evaluation before it was filed publicly, she said. Which means someone at the extension office, or someone who saw a copy before. She stopped. Then Fitch. The bank assessor. He saw the breeding record. He saw which animals I identified as primary. Her voice was controlled, but her eyes were sharp and fast. I don't know if he's working with Bent directly, but the information went somewhere it shouldn't have. Wesley picked up his hat. I'm going to Bent's property, he said. No, you're not, Anna said. Anna, you going to Bent's property angry and without documentation is exactly what he wants, she said. You assault a man on his own land, you trespass, you make any kind of scene without legal standing, and everything we've built gets used against you. She stepped in front of him, not blocking, just placing herself in his sightline, making him look at her instead of the door. I know what you want to do. I understand it, but it won't get the cattle back. He stopped. His hands were shaking. He hadn't noticed until now. Then what do? He said. We file a theft report with the county sheriff this morning, she said. We provide the breeding record documentation as evidence of the animal's identity and commercial value. We reference the extension office validation and the active breeding contracts. And we make sure Dale Halverson and Tom McCready are on record as having contractual interest in those animals' safe return. The sheriff in this county. I know, Anna said. I know who appointed him and who he's friendly with, but a formal report creates a record. And a record with 2 contracted business partners attached to it is much harder to quietly disappear than a rancher's complaint about missing cattle. Wesley looked at her. You've been ready for this, he said. I've been afraid of this, she said. That's not the same as being ready, but yes, I thought about what it would look like in case it happened. He put his hat on. Come with me, he said, to the sheriff. That was already the plan, she said. They rode to town together. The sheriff's office smelled like old coffee and gun oil, and the man behind the desk, Sheriff Aldous Cray, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with the careful eyes of someone who measured every situation before committing to a response, looked up when they came in and did the same small recalibration that most men did when they saw Anna. Wesley set the breeding record on the desk. I need to report a theft, he said. 3 cattle removed from my property through a deliberately cut fence section overnight with evidence of being led north toward the Bent property line. Cray looked at the breeding record. You got documentation on these animals? 22 pages of it, Wesley said. Plus the county extension office validation filed last week by Harlan Burke. Something moved through Cray's expression at Burke's name. Something that said the extension assessor's reputation carried weight even in this office. Miss Cole, Cray said, looking at Anna. You're the one who built the breeding program. I identified and documented what Howard Crow built, Anna said. The records are in that book. And these specific animals are in the records. Pages 9 through 14, she said. Individual identification data, including distinctive markings, weight measurements, and scoring results. The gray bull calf has a notch in his left ear, natural, not branded, that's documented on page 11 with a hand-drawn diagram. Cray opened the breeding record to page 11. He looked at the diagram. He closed the book and stood up. I'll need to ride out to both properties, he said. The Crow North fence and the Bent perimeter. We'll ride with you, Wesley said. Cray looked at him steadily. Mr. Crow, you ride with me as a complainant, not as a man looking for a confrontation. You understand the difference? Yes, sir, Wesley said. Miss Cole. Understood, Anna said. They rode. Cray examined the cut fence with the thorough, unhurried attention of a man who had seen deliberate damage before and knew how to recognize it. He crouched where Anna had crouched, read the ground the same way, and made notes in a small book he carried in his breast pocket. Then they rode to Bent's property line. Clifford Bent met them at his gate himself. He was a tall man, well-dressed for a weekday, which said he'd been expecting company, even if he hadn't been expecting the sheriff. He looked at Cray with the relaxed expression of a man on his own land, who felt entirely secure there, and at Wesley with the careful neutrality of a chess player looking at a board, and at Anna with something that was very close to contempt, but had been trained into something more careful. "Aldous," Bent said, "what brings you out this way?" "Got a theft report, Clifford," Cray said. "3 cattle from the Crow North section. Tracks lead this direction." "My men found 3 stray cattle near my east pasture this morning," Bent said, without hesitation, without any of the tells of a man improvising. "We were going to notify Mr. Crow today. Animals must have gotten through a weak section of his fence." "The fence section was cut," Cray said. "Animals can do strange things to old wire," Bent said. "These cuts were made with wire cutters," Cray said. 4 clean strokes. I'd like to see the cattle you found." A pause. Short, but real. "Of course," Bent said. "Happy to cooperate." The cattle were in Bent's east holding pen, all 3 of them. The red heifer was in the far corner, and even from a distance Wesley could see she was stressed, head up, breathing too fast, the posture of an animal that knew it was in a wrong place. Anna walked to the pen fence, looked at the red heifer, and said nothing for a moment. Then she turned to Cray. "Page 12, she said. "Left flank 4 inches above the hip. There's a patch of coat that grows in a reverse whirl counterclockwise instead of clockwise. It's documented with a measurement." Cray opened the breeding record to page 12. He looked at it. He looked at the heifer. He walked to the pen, leaned over the top rail, and looked at her left flank. He stood back up. "Clifford," he said quietly, "I'm going to need you to return these animals to the Crow Ranch today." Bent's face didn't change, not exactly, but something behind it did a small, cold shift like a door closing. "These are strays that wandered onto my property," Bent said. "These are documented commercial livestock with active contractual standing," Cray said, and held up the breeding record, whose identifying marks match this record page for page. He closed the book. "I'm not arguing about it in your pasture. The cattle go back today. If you want to contest the theft report, you do it through your lawyer." The silence that followed was the longest one Wesley had stood inside in years. Bent looked at Wesley, then at Anna. At Anna for a long time. "Your ranch hand has caused you a significant amount of trouble," Bent said to Wesley. His voice was level and pleasant and poisonous. "Stirring up water rights disputes, inviting bank scrutiny, filing reports. A man builds a quiet life out here, and then something comes along and disrupts everything. My ranch hand," Wesley said, "found what my father built and made sure it didn't disappear." He held Bent's gaze. "Like it was supposed to." Bent smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "The cattle will be returned this afternoon," he said to Cray. They were. Clem met the Bent ranch hand at the north fence at 3 o'clock and watched all 3 animals walk back through. He checked each one against the breeding record, a habit he'd developed in the past weeks without being asked, and sent the hand back with nothing more than a nod. When he came in that evening, he said, "She's okay, the heifer. She was spooked, but she's okay." Anna exhaled. Just once. Short and quiet. Then she went and checked the heifer herself. Wesley found her in the pasture a half hour later, standing beside the red heifer, with her hand on the animal's neck, not speaking, just being there. He climbed the fence and crossed to her. "She's fine," Anna said without turning. "I know," Wesley said. "He's not done," she said. "Bent. He'll find another way." "Maybe," Wesley said. "But every way he tries, we file a report. Every move he makes, we document it. Every time he does something that touches the breeding program, or the water rights, or this ranch, he puts himself on record." "That takes years," Anna said. "Yes," Wesley said. "It does." She turned and looked at him. "Is that what you're prepared for?" she said. "Years of this." He looked at her, this woman, who had come to his gate on a crooked-eared horse with a canvas sack and a Winchester and 17 words in an advertisement, who had read his father's forgotten work and understood it better than the man who'd inherited it, who had stood in front of a bank assessor and a county sheriff and Clifford Bent himself, and never once led with a wound. "I'm prepared for years of this, with the right partner, he said. Anna was quiet. The heifer moved under her hand, shifted, slightly settled. The partnership agreement, Anna said. I want 40%. Wesley blinked. I was going to offer 40. Then we agree. We agree, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. That creek water looked clear on top, moving underneath, and something in her face shifted into something he'd never quite seen on it before. Not soft exactly, more like resolved, like a decision that had been forming for a long time had finally finished forming. Your father built something extraordinary, she said. He did, Wesley said. So did you. She looked away. But she didn't move her hand from the heifer's neck, and after a moment, Wesley moved to stand beside her, and they stood together in the quiet of the pasture while the light changed around them. The partnership was formalized 2 weeks later. A lawyer from Amarillo drew up the documents, a man Anna had corresponded with briefly before arriving at the Crow Ranch, as it turned out, in connection with a water rights matter she'd been researching. Wesley signed first. Anna signed second, with the careful, deliberate signature of someone who had thought about this moment before it arrived. 40% ownership. Full shared operational control. The breeding program under joint management. Clem witnessed it. He didn't say anything when he signed the witness line, but he pressed his lips together in the way he did when he was working to keep an expression off his face and not entirely succeeding. Harlan Burke's formal Extension Office report was published in the County Agricultural Record 30 days after his visit. 3 pages. Specific, technical, unambiguous. The Crow Ranch Selective Breeding Program was identified as a significant contribution to cold climate livestock management in the Texas Panhandle. The report named the breeding line formally. He called it the Crow Line. Anna read the report at the kitchen table. She read it twice slowly, the way she read everything that mattered. Then she closed it and looked at the wall where the bank letter was still pinned. We should take that down, she said. Not yet, Wesley said. She looked at him. 6 months, he said. When the final review clears. She nodded once. The 6-month review came on a Wednesday morning. A different bank representative this time, not Fitch, who had been quietly transferred to another branch 2 months prior. Under circumstances, the bank declined to specify publicly. The new man walked the property, reviewed the updated documentation package, confirmed both breeding contracts, noted the Extension Office validation, and shook both Wesley's and Anna's hands before riding back to Amarillo. The formal clearance arrived by mail 4 days later. Loan structure confirmed. No further accelerated review scheduled. Wesley unpinned the letter from the wall. He folded it carefully and put it in the back of the breeding record between the last notation Anna had made on the day the cattle came home and the first page of what she'd already begun calling Volume 2. Clifford Bent never made another direct move against the Crow Ranch. He didn't disappear from the county men like Bent rarely did. But the water rights challenge he'd been building quietly collapsed when the county board ruled in favor of the Crow claim, supported by the upstream diversion documentation Anna had filed. The railroad corridor, when it was finally approved 3 years later, ran exactly where the 1880 survey had proposed. The southern section of the Crow property became a right-of-way access point, negotiated at fair value, which paid off the remaining loan balance in a single transaction. The day that payment cleared, Wesley rode the full 412 acres, every acre his father had walked for 30 years, and came back in and sat down across from Anna at the kitchen table where it had all begun. Paid in full, he said. Anna looked at him. Your father would have liked to know, she said. He did know, Wesley said. He just didn't know it yet. She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers, just briefly, just for a moment, and then pulled back and opened the breeding record to the current page and picked up her pen. The Crow Line went on to become a recognized standard across 6 panhandle counties. Ranchers put their names on waiting lists to access the program. The cattle that carried the core traits survived winters that devastated other herds, persisted through droughts that cost neighboring operations thousands of dollars in losses, and produced offspring that did the same. Not every year was easy. Not every problem had a clean solution. There were seasons that tested everything they'd built, and people who tried in smaller ways and larger ones to take what wasn't theirs. That was the nature of the country, and the nature of people, and neither Wesley nor Anna had ever expected otherwise. But the ranch held. It held because of 15 years of a father's patient, unrecognized work. It held because of a 17-word advertisement and a woman who arrived at the right gate at the right moment with the right set of eyes. It held because of 22 pages of documentation and a red heifer with a counterclockwise whirl on her left flank and a creek that ran clean once the diversion was removed. It held because Anna Cole had looked at a dying ranch and refused absolutely, without negotiation, without compromise, to let what was already there disappear. When people asked her years later what she'd done to save the Crow Ranch, she always gave the same answer. "I didn't save it," she said. "I just refused to let what was already there disappear." And that was the truth as far as it went. But the whole truth was this: she had stayed. And the Crow Ranch, the land, the line, the legacy had been worth every single day of it.